Good evening and welcome to this week's Joko conversation. It's been a couple of weeks. Missed being here with y'all. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whenever you might be watching this. I'm Brother Youssef, a member of the Joko Collective, among other things. And as always, as most times, I'm joined by my partner and comrade, Tasha. Hi, Tasha.
And hi, good brother Youssef, good partner and comrade. Yes, it has been a miss, and we have been out of pocket, out of sync, somewhere else doing some other stuff, but good stuff and stuff that is building consciousness and community. So we're catching up with ourselves, and so we can get on to our discussion this evening. Um, what about the global south in all of the um, focus and discussion on the implications of the U.S. Israel war on Iran and Iran's robust, shall we say, uh, unexpectedly robust response, um, and all of the implications, all of the talk of about World War III and all the like, right? We don't hear, per usual, a lot of conversation about the implications for the global South, right? For the people, lands, resources, political uh, relationships of the people of the global South. And so we wanted to start scratching around in that a bit tonight. And we always begin by putting at the forefront and giving thanks that for all of the parenting forces in our personal lives that have um, put in our life path this way of being people who are about organizing their lives around making a contribution to making this world um, a place for humans, a livable place for humans and all of the other sentient beings that we share the planet with, and recognizing that in at least this last 500-600 years of construction of this current system, we've gotten way out of warp, way out of sync with happy human life, right? Increasing levels of suffering, increasing levels of, um, as Yusuf's, the line from Yusuf's poem, um, the expanding of the horizons of despair has been the constant feature, right? And such that, right, we come to a place where we can talk about uh, a warring that is so consuming and so complete that it can uh, destroy so much of what has been built, literally been built by humans to this point, in terms of um, the integrated global economy, which, however um, off it is now, can be corrected to make something, to create something that creates thriving for everyone. Um, all of these things, right? These things that underlie um, a just world, the just world that we want to see. And we're glad to be people who are a part of that push, that energy, and that mission. And we always also bring to the forefront, um, uplift, as the young people say, that we are members of the African global family, and we salute the contributions and vision and ingenuity and creativity and all of the contributions that have come from the African family, global family, and our particular position in this world order to subvert these damaging and exploitative and just anti-humane systems. Um, Contributions coming from our global family have been tremendous, have been great, and have pushed and continue to push um, us into that new, more humane, more just, more livable, truly livable space. And we recognize always that any work that we are attempting to do and that we do, anything that we accomplish living here um, on Turtle Island, in so-called Los Angeles, um, in the unceded lands of the Tongva and Chumash peoples, that's where we are. Okay, we're not in, uh, except for some other kind of articulation, Los Angeles, California, United States of America. We are in the unceded lands of the Tongva people. It's by the hospitality of their ancestors and those who have kept their culture, kept the culture, and lived the sovereignty and continue to flower, right? Continue to flower and thrive. It's by their hospitality that we, as children of Africa, do this work, do this liberation work. And so we always take a minute to intone that before we get started with our discussion. And so that box has been checked. Good brother Yusuf, I pass the mic.
Thank you, Tasha. Um, yeah, we'll get right into it, right? Because I've got a video queued up, right? And it's, really the conversation is picking up on where we left off, right? What are the, this reinvigorated, or at least, the ideation from the empire to recolonize, right? The this iteration of the Trump regime, dusting off or maybe I should say openly dusting off the Monroe Doctrine, and in predictable narcissistic style, calling it the Donroe Doctrine, but this effort, right, or the or at least the what's the word I'm looking for? This projection of controlling the Western Hemisphere, right, and thinking about the at least the rhetorical attacks on Greenland's sovereignty, as part of that, right? That, from every part of North America, including the North American Arctic. And then, the context of Rubio's encouragement to the Europeans to embrace their imperial past and re-expand, right? So that's really where we're picking up. But starting with, comments, as it says in our description for tonight's video, earlier this week, Monday, or at least Monday, it aired, broadcast, no, posted, I guess, Rania Khalek, a journalist on Breakthrough News, and her program Dispatches. She interviewed Prabhat Patnaik, a Marxist economist um, uh, in teaching in India, right? A professor in I think Nehru University in India, and it was a really thorough and in depth conversation at looking at the implications of this U.S. Israel war on Iran and Iran's resistance, its implications for the global South, um, for what used to be called the Third World, for the formerly colonized, societies, right, of the modern world. The and The way Rania and her producers set it up, all the pertinent commentary is right in the beginning, in kind of the preview of the conversation. Some critical comments that he makes that are somewhere in the middle of the conversation, and I do recommend folks take a look at it. Um, Dispatches, and it's the Breakthrough News channel on YouTube. That's where I watched it anyway. I don't know if they have, if they're on other platforms. Um, but I do recommend folks check out the interview, the full interview, as well as other things, good use and information that you can find on Breakthrough News. The But yes, uh, Prabhat Patnaik, and I want to spell his name right, and I'm not doing that. So, to share with you momentarily, and so we'll watch that opening, right, and pick up with his comments, right, or we'll use his comments as our jumping off point, because it's certainly a question I've been wondering, right, with this this reinvigorated aggression, right, against the global South. I mean, as you indicated in your opening comments, they're kind of bogged down in Iran, but they're still, making plans for Cuba. So, um, and where else, right? So, let's get into that. Let me stop, talking about it. Share the video because it is quite short. I think it's only about 30 seconds to a minute at the most. There we go. And then we can comment. Let's see. Everything should be ready to go. Probably too loud. No, maybe not. Let's make sure everyone can hear.
If the US actually gets away with Iran, if there's a regime change in Iran and so on, in that case, the US would get emboldened to go ahead with similar attempts at regime change in lots of countries. In that sense, I believe the freedom of the whole of the global South, including countries like my own, is really bound up with the resistance of what is happening in Iran. If Iran falls, in that case, the whole of the global South is in danger of being completely recolonized.
I mean, really, that's it, right? That encapsulates it right there. Again, I do recommend taking a look at the episode, right? Taking a look at the full interview, but those that point right there, that we're in a position where Iran, whatever one may think about its insufficiencies, democratically, whatever that even means to people, um, it is nonetheless kind of a linchpin right now for what is going to happen next for the global South, for the countries of Africa, the countries of Asia, the countries of Latin America, in this moment when the empire, has explicitly, um, expressed its intentions, right, to recolonize, really, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now they are bogged down, or maybe that's too, that maybe that's not the right uh, term yet, right? Because there aren't troops on the ground yet or anything like that from the U.S. and Israel, but it's certainly, they what given all the damage that they are doing, with their missile strikes on Iran. Iran is returning damage in kind, right,
Mm-hmm.
in Israel and the U.S. installations around the Gulf countries, right? Um, and the major development in the Strait, right? That Iran is demanding toll of some ships, and that toll be paid in the Chinese currency. What gives the U.S. such unchallenged financial power, economic power in the world? The dollar, right? The dollar standard, and specifically the petrodollar, right? Um, I forget the term they use, the term that's used for not other than petrodollar, right? Is universal currency, the proper word. I can't remember the exact phrase, but anyway, setting this precedent, demanding payment in yuan, for passage, right? It kind, it looks like one of those other ways where this regime, through its exercise of its effort to exercise its power, right, has shot itself in the foot, basically. Um, so
Mm-hmm.
Iran is making them pay, but
Mm-hmm.
his hypothetical is, what if Iran's resistance ultimately fails?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, you've heard the reports, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
the regime's sense of success in Venezuela convinced them they could, accomplish the same in Iran.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's just an indication of their newfound, confidence, right? And
The hubris part. Mm-hmm.
and this these aggressive interventions and attacks, right? That they announced they would be on the march, and they're doing it, right? And even if they're doing it in incompetent ways, they're doing it. So what should countries of the global South be doing, be thinking? How should they be preparing? right? I mean, neither one of us is an expert on, the countries of the global south and all of their geopolitics and everything, but we have a general sense, um, and certainly an idea of what's at stake. So, we were talking about it yesterday. What are the Caribbean nations going to do? Um, and this really goes back to last year when the U.S. began bombing fishing boats in the Caribbean. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I don't know for how long, but the Caribbean, declared a zone of peace.
Mm-hmm.
Now that peace is broken.
Mm-hmm.
What recourse do the Caribbean does the Caribbean community have? Right? What, even if it's, what can they do
Mm-hmm.
economically?
Mm-hmm.
Can they start refusing cruise ships from the U.S.? But that's so vital to their economies, right? Looked like you were about to say something.
Yeah, just in listening uh, to the discussion with Prabhat Patnaik, um, one of the things or one of the things that he stressed, and of course went into a lot of geopolitical detail and reference that I would not be able to properly represent, but the even more fundamental, actually, um, than those specificities, he was saying is the symbolic value, is and even to this point where, the jury is out, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
it's still not quite known which forces will prevail in their agendas, in their stated
Mm-hmm.
agendas, because, and also what is prevailing mean um, for the U.S. and Israel in a space where there's so much infrastructural damage, but to their proxies, what do they hope to, and no potentials, real, meaningful potentials for like military assistance, but with all of the damage to their proxies, what is it? Is it a pyrrhic? To what extent is the victory, and in what ways is the victory? Would the victory be kind of empty, empty of
Mm-hmm.
what,
Mm-hmm.
but in this sense of feeling that feeling of being emboldened to recolonize, and yet the example of Iran, um, it, lights that, ignites that. I'm getting the vision of a little, like the cartoons when they lit the little wick and the dynamite and it went across down the
Mm-hmm.
road and boom. But igniting the courage of smaller nations, and even small nations, igniting the memories of all of these stalemates, at
Yeah.
least, that small countries have brought to these larger countries. And so, it, even at this stage, it bolsters the
Mm-hmm.
confidence,
Mm-hmm.
right? Raises the energies of folk to say, yeah, sovereignty better, time to get these Europeans, off our back, collectively, as
Yeah.
they,
The
in
collective West. Yeah.
shall I say, Rubio's sense of the term,
Yeah.
with US, the
Mm-hmm.
children of Europe, in his assertion that that should be the goal of the West, to sally forth and because, in all of this, yes, hubris talk, right? And then this flip side, that if Iran prevails with these same issues of, of the problems of a destruction of infrastructure, um, and in the global south, the economic ramifications, like in terms of Iran's goals now with the power grid, right? And also choking off supply, right? The oil supply and whatnot. The economic, though the economic ramifications would hit the global south proportionately harder, heavier, make right, it being worth the exchange, that essentially,
Mhm.
as all
Right.
of these trends have been doing,
Yeah.
driving, breaking up that the unilateral control, you
Yeah.
know, uh, profile, and
Mhm.
the bilateral control profile, and really creating these diversifying the points of power,
Mhm.
on the planet. And, even in the aftermath, um, forever, uh,
Yeah.
what, breaking up Europe's control and the US's control, and driving these countries into um, creative economic relationships and solutions and whatnot, also
Mhm.
organized projection
Mhm.
of the dollar, just finding, biting the bullet. It's like, hey, we're just going to find another way to do this. We're going, um, in order to resist. So um, that part,
Mhm.
the way it bolsters the spirit, because there's no one first of all who doesn't understand wherever you are. Well, I can't say that. So I think it would be better to say um, no one who has any kind of sense of the most elementary sense of internationalism, the most elementary sense of anti-imperialism, the most elementary sense of, what European hegemony has meant to the globe. No, the energy of, celebration of, yes, just of, yes, someone is doing a stand up, someone is simply not laying down, not accepting this. That, and I can't find the word for that. Encouragement, heartening, you know,
All of those things. Yeah. Mhm.
those things, right? That it's in itself, and which, I heard in that interview, in that discussion, um, uh, with Patnaik, that that in itself is intrinsically valuable and
Yeah.
would mete out
Yes.
materially, right? It's going to mete out materially in many ways, So, um, yeah, the Iran, the hope, carrying the hope, and
Yeah.
you know, in many ways, and not, not alone. It's the focus. It's the moment,
Well,
right?
right now, exactly, and
Yeah.
really the blunder by the empire, um, and yeah, the blunder by the empire, the U.S., Israel, um, who are feeling the damage right now. The And that
Mm-hmm.
de-dollarization is a real thing. That folks have been talking about, trying to find ways to do, etc. This is
Mm-hmm.
one of the reasons that's been proposed for NATO's, um, NATO's attack on the Jamhuriya in Libya and the overthrow of the Gaddafi government, is because one of the plans, right, was a one currency for Africa, right, through the African Union, and not and based on gold, right, the African dinar, and that was one of the reasons that that they did not want that the collective West, right, they did not want that project to
Yeah.
go forward. So it's been a while.
Yes.
Folks have been attempting, And of course, this has been part of the project of BRICS, right? This global South economic, well, global South plus Russia, and Russia
Mhm.
is conceptually outside of the West,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm. Mhm.
is truly a Eurasian country.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
despite Russia's history as a Christian nation since the Middle Ages, it's still outside of the West in some kind, yeah, conceptually, right? The So the BRIC nations, right, creating have been making efforts to create that alternative, and now as I was watching some commentary from a BRICS analysis earlier, that this what I was talking about earlier, right? This demand for a toll paid in yuan concretizes all of the boardroom talk and committee and conferences talking about a challenge to the petrodollar. These conditions are now making it real in a
Mhm.
way that it hadn't been before, and
Mhm.
and again may indeed, as that image of the spreading explosion, right, or the spreading fire. Um, you know, here's a model. Um, and what does victory look like for Iran?
Mhm.
Really, all they have to do is survive. I mean, this has basically been the case. The U.S. Well, as I saw, I was listening to a couple of present U.S. congressmen who are veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan, um, were saying, the U.S. military, a lot of these big Western militaries, but the U.S. military in particular, sure, can go in and have these tactical victories. That was true, and they said going back to Vietnam, right? You have these kind of tactical victories, but you don't end up with strategic victories. So eventually, the natives win, right? Eventually, they had to get out of Vietnam. They eventually
Mhm.
lost Iraq, even if it
Mhm.
isn't called that, right?
Yeah.
Eventually, so what was gained in Afghanistan, right? The Taliban were in power when you went in, the Taliban are in power
Mhm.
when you come out, right? You know what?
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, tactical victories that then and so they were commenting on currently that yes, the Trump is getting reports of tactical victories because there are these tactical victories, but that tactical victory does not mean victory, right? It does not mean strategic
Mhm.
victory that you've won the war,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
all they have to do is survive. As they say,
Mhm.
the war of attrition, right?
Mhm.
And it's
Mhm.
already unpopular, right? So even
Mhm.
and I think more than just whether U.S. citizens want to be inconvenienced, they're like genuinely opposed, and again, across that political spectrum, as we see,
Mhm.
tired of
Mhm.
these wars of choice, however
Mhm.
they frame them as defensive, right?
Right.
Are just
Right.
tired of them, right? And tired of the hit on the treasury that could be invested in the people. And again, across whatever left means and right means in mainstream U.S. political politics, it's across the board, right? What is it? Such a there's like 100% approval of the war among those who identify as MAGA, but those
Mhm.
who identify as MAGA I'm going to be generous and
Uh-huh.
say are maybe 20% of the population, right? So extremely unpopular, or at the highest, just in terms of, you know, Trump seems to be around 30%, close to 30% approval
Mm-hmm.
generally, and that's the MAGA base. So that's still,
Mm-hmm.
if we take that number, right, that's
Mm-hmm.
still 7 out of 10 people who are opposed to the choice you've made, right, and opposed to it for various reasons, and do not believe the U.S. should be supporting Israel,
Mm-hmm.
because they're already have shifted on support of Israel after
Mm-hmm.
watching genocide live, right? So,
Right. Right.
and the U.S. and Iran, so Iran rejected the U.S.'s last 15-point whatever plan, but had their own 5-point plan for a ceasefire, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
even the war. That
Mm-hmm.
all were quite reasonable under the
Mm-hmm.
circumstances, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
they're the ones who were attacked.
Right. Right.
A cessation of all attacks on them,
Mm-hmm.
reparations, right, to rebuild their infrastructure,
Mm-hmm.
unquestioned sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz, um,
Mm-hmm.
leaving and cessation of hostilities against their allies in the region. So stop bombing Lebanon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Stop bombing Yemen and the Houthis.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Their the Iraqi Shia
Mm-hmm.
that are in solidarity. Um, leave them alone. And actually,
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the fifth one, right? But I know those are at least those four, which are seem quite reasonable when you didn't start the war,
Mm-hmm.
right? Stop
Right.
warring on us, pay us for the
Right.
damages that were created by warring on us, leave our allies alone too, who only came to our aid,
Yes.
and the Strait of Hormuz is ours, you know. Or now,
Mm-hmm.
I think part of the strait might also belong to or be, well, the United Arab Emirates has some territorial waters around there. So does Oman. So maybe that side of the strait, but whatever, right? They're reasonable demands. That's victory for the Iranians, right? They just got to survive, and if they survive, then they can make these demands, and they seem to be
Mm-hmm.
surviving quite
Mm-hmm.
well, because they've been planning,
Yeah.
as folks have been saying. Not they've been planning not since last summer, not since last June, the so-called 12-day war. They've been planning since 1979
Right.
for an eventual
Right.
invasion. Right. So.
Right. Right. Which cannot be imagined. Which
Mhm.
cannot, and but it's very interesting, um because all of this ongoing conversation about um which white supremacist order is worse. Are they the same? Is it, is the do you have six in one hand and half dozen in another? Um, well, I guess it could be said that for all of these years,
Mhm.
of how do I want to say this? Previous administrations had a policy of not getting into this kind of conflict with
Yeah.
Iran.
Yeah.
They were quite right judicious, as it's being
Yeah.
discussed, about not having this occur. Right.
Right. And then using sanctions, right? Their weapon was sanctions, which are devastating enough.
Right. Um, so this the piece where the hubris part, you know, uh,
Hmm.
there wasn't so much humorous. There's a hubris in that reasoning. There is a fundamental understanding. You know, this is what we're
Yeah.
dealing with. This is what we can and cannot do. There are limits right? Whatever we tell our public, whatever we tell the people, we understand that there are limits to what we can actually, uh, you know, actually achieve physically, in that kind of way.
Mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm,
but this other hubris factor and the religious ideology factor, the theology factor, and whatnot, contributing to the hubris
mm-hmm.
is a driving force, and that incompetence and that um, inability to what do you say again? So many of these previous administrations kept the policy the way it was for good reason. The information is there. How come you can't access it? How come you didn't get the memo? How come you didn't read the memo? you know and just felt like you could just
And it's more
say
of that right
anything.
there, right? How come you didn't read the memo?
Read the memo. Yeah, because I mean,
Or why
that
did
there
you
are
decide
people.
to ignore the memo?
Why did you choose to ignore ignore the memo?
Mm-hmm,
And there's the hubris.
mm-hmm,
Also,
mm-hmm.
there's conversation. There is a conversation that I want to follow more closely and see what folks are discussing about this kind of um, neo feudal calculation where the level of destruction is calculated and the losses to the US as a nation are calculated into an imagined order where the billionaire class are the rulers, and this whole um uh where nations are empty shells, and it's really this billionaire class of techno lords that
Mm-hmm.
are and techno lords and ruling by way
In their
as
fantasies, right? I mean, I know they're trying to implement it, but
that's what
yeah.
they're trying to go for. I mean, but that's right, part of the logic of destroying the administrative state
Mm-hmm,
here with the
mm-hmm.
Doge bullshit and everything
Yeah.
else they're doing to continue to depress and destroy,
Mm-hmm.
the state, because they're setting themselves up, as
I don't
rulers
think they're
of
doing as
might.
well as they thought to, right? I don't think they're doing as well as they
Let me
thought they might.
So when I say they are doing it, thank you then for rephrasing that. Yes, this is the vision. So, there may be some influence of that, in terms of this calculus, of destruction,
Yeah, they are,
maybe
and
they
they're
are.
destroying a lot. I mean, because I don't want to minimize that, right?
Yes, yes, what part of the vision for what did Trump say about Gaza? Great real estate,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
you know,
Because that's what he is, right? He
Riviera Police.
revert to his original.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But anyway, just
And I
just
think
that part.
but I think that the first year of this second term, of this second regime, where again, they sort of blitzkrieged from the beginning, right? Day one, with all the various executive orders and whatnot, and um, that what
Mm,
repression produces resistance, right? And people have been pushing back. Let all the folks they fired from the federal workforce, who are then becoming radicalized to the left, right? Or the way in which more and more people realized just how necessary these federal agencies were to their life, right? As things now become more difficult, and
Right.
now
Right.
that
Right.
much harder, to get a response from Social Security, et cetera. And we
Yeah.
already saw, right, with the not just the kind of big, no kings, major marches from last year, which demonstrated a lot, right? They're just ongoing small, demonstrations and marches throughout the country and in other places and throughout US territories, though they barely get covered. Such, people, we remember the response to Tesla early on, right? That Elon Musk had to get back to work and get out of the White House and all this, right? So
Mhm.
this is, I actually think in their hubris, again, just like with this Iran war, they didn't calculate that there would be as much resistance as they've already gotten, right? Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
so
Mhm.
yeah,
Mhm.
they're powerful, they're well positioned and all that. But I remember the lesson I received from one of my first professors at St. Mary's College of California, Carla Schick, retired now, but became a math teacher in the Oakland Unified School District. Said, forget you college kids, I'm gonna go teach math in the hood. The But I remember, she made this distinction, right, in a conversation we were having about power, and she said, no, the ruling class, the rulers, the bourgeoisie, these
Mhm.
technocrats, they have control, but the
Oh,
people have power because the people can change it. And that's all. And when the people move, right? And I think more and more in that, right? Folks are getting radicalized again.
yes.
Someone who has gained more and more of a following, Jennifer Welch, her partner, on
Mhm.
their
Mhm.
podcast, Angie, she
Mhm.
calls her
Mhm.
Plumps.
Mhm.
What folks might say are, sort of middle America, um, soccer
Mhm.
mom,
Mhm.
you know, even
Mhm.
affluent. They're
Mhm.
getting like radicalized. Like, no,
Mhm.
this, the Democratic
Yes.
Party, is not enough, or the Democratic Party needs to move further
Yes.
left, right? And I
Yeah.
think, there are more and more people like that. People are they're tired of this level of
So much.
exploitation and
Yeah.
austerity and all
Yeah.
the stuff, right? And this is what I think
Yeah.
they didn't anticipate. The tech
Yeah.
lords, the MAGA lords, the theocrat. Well, the
Mhm.
theocrats don't care, as you were saying, because they're motivated in other ways, right? And they don't care that
Mhm.
they're a minority. That they
Mhm.
like it that way in some ways.
Mhm.
The But
Mhm.
I still think, none of these folks anticipated as the way that lots of just uh, lots of folks in the United States have been radicalized, left
Yeah.
populist radicalized, right? That ready to, march
Yeah.
on the tech lords with their torches and pitchforks.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and and that is also, I think, um, a general sentiment among the people of the global South,
Mhm.
where
Mhm.
left
Mhm.
populist resistance is popular, even if the heads of state are doing whatever diplomatic dances and economic dances they have to do. The street um, is not pleased with what happened in Venezuela. Cuba has
Mhm.
declared its readiness to fight, right? And they're going to fight.
Right.
There may be, and so there will
Right.
be another inspiration. And Cuba has been an inspiration, right, for all this time.
Absolutely.
Um, and
Yes.
it's a thing that I think folks on the Western left
Mm-hmm.
gotta learn to appreciate that there are other ways we need to define democracy other than the kind of
Mm-hmm.
electoral multi-party system, um,
Mm-hmm.
and they Western leftists or whatever that range of Western leftists, they got to learn to appreciate what it means for countries and peoples of the global South, including internal colonies in the global North, to exercise sovereignty, even if that form of democracy doesn't look like what you think democracy should look like. Recognize, though they were military coups, the Alliance for Sahelian States, that there's a kind of democracy on the ground, right? And the people, and etc. And it's a
Mm-hmm.
and whatever processes they are dealing with now. There are
Mm-hmm.
these other ways, and sovereignty matters to the formerly colonized world that and the currently neo-colonized world that is still struggling for full sovereignty. So what is it going to look like for the global South? Hopefully, folks are taking the lesson, and have been taking the lesson from Iran, and are planning, right? Planning to defend themselves. You've heard me say, in our private conversations, I have no idea why a country like Colombia hasn't already asked all U.S. advisors to leave. Why African nations right now aren't saying, AFRICOM, you got to go. You just got, the French are leaving, you Americans go with them. And the Sahelian states have asked that, right? They've demanded that. But, this right here, I didn't know. I just learned today, and I think this demand has been made, that the Indian Ocean island that Iran was able to hit, where there's a U.S. base, Diego Garcia, and which
Mm-hmm.
was a surprise because they didn't
Mm-hmm.
expect missiles to be able to go that far.
Mm-hmm.
But that is a British
Mm-hmm.
territory that the U.S. leases, I guess, for a base or whatever. But that it's
Mm-hmm.
actually Mauritian territory, right? It's Britain, snagged that from Mauritius, who
Mm-hmm.
makes their claim. Um, this you know I'm this is probably the last gasp of the empire of the West. All of this reinvigorated, we're gonna recolonize and everything. I don't think the people of the global South are going to put up with it, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it behooves those governments to prepare. I got a
Mm-hmm.
little distracted by the message from
Yes.
Brooklyn. Thank you for
Yes.
sharing, and I want to put it on the screen.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing and joining the conversation. And yeah, I've been wanting to chime in on this, taking a broader look at what this radicalization looks like, and also just use the language, break down radicalization as in this, yes, radicalize as in it becoming clearer and clearer, gaining more and more of an understanding for systemic change, that there is a
Mhm.
systemic problem.
Yeah,
This systemic
yeah.
problem has to do with a set of factors, right, that are promoting this, because it's becoming so, it's being laid bare, right? That there's a
Hmm.
set of economic relationships, structural relationships, that
Hmm.
uh, right, ultimately are eroding any of the of that, I guess, that very optimistic era of middle class expansion that folk thought was going to go on forever and actually ultimately absorb more and more people into a growing middle class. Of course, clearly that's been contested for decades, and folks have been saying, no, this is not what's happening. And it actually, relative to America, you're building up an economy around credit. You're doing this, that, and the other. The wages are not keeping up with, aren't comparing to profit, blah, blah, blah. But the popular memory, the consciousness, the understanding, right? Always, as we always talk about, the what happens alongside that systematic dumbing down that was understood to be needed, right? So the gap, I think what I'm trying to say, in perception is being closed. Those questions are being quickly exposed, and there's answers are available from a lot of quarters. And because a lot of people are also abandoning the legacy media, also a result of the exposure of the Palestinian genocide, right? For other sources that they are becoming more and more clear are actually having explanatory force, taking people into, right, deep question, looking for deeper commentary, and happening, yes, very relatively quickly. The move of so many evangelicals out of the Christian nationalist camp, all of that is significant. And yeah, playing a huge part, and taking it back to the global South. Do we have another comment? Did you read you just posted the comment? We didn't read the comment.
Well, I posted them for people to read.
Okay. And actually, they're saying what I just said, kinda. The generations after the boomers didn't get the benefits of capitalism the same way. We don't have in our daily lives to keep that idea of America going. Exactly. And now that things are blowing up structurally, or you have this force coming in to really, embrace the disparity and say, not only is there disparity, but we're proud of it. And, F you, and no social programs and no education and all of those things, making it more and more stark. So,
Which is just neoliberalism come home. I mean, those are the demands that were put on, the nations of the global South, right? The conditions of structural adjustment, right? You can't spend on your social infrastructure, right? You have to defund education, defund, healthcare, whatever, right? And I mean, it's been here, but it's, now it's here in full throat, represented in this rapacious, kleptocratic, plutocratic, oligarchic, fascist, all those, moments. And it is the moment of crisis. And moments of crisis are moments of opportunity also. As the last comment from Brooklyn, a new idea has to be put in place. The moment for the new ideas to be put in place, this moment of crisis, and it's being played out in a couple of ways, or across the board. Really, it's being played out. Can't go back to business as usual. I mean, it's just that, can't go back to business as usual. Whatever else is going to happen. The world has changed.
And this kind of
the country has changed.
In this country, right? The doggedness of the Democratic Party to just refuse to budge, unless budge left in in an articulable way, and a right to assert that. creates actually more pressure for this explosion of
Mhm.
expectation, so it
Mhm.
provides
And
less.
leaves the lane open for for some far right winger who's willing to say those things,
Yeah,
which is what we've seen.
yeah,
Right?
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
um
that was part of Trump's
well, the
strategy,
promise.
right? Able to
Yeah,
say the things that everyone knows about the system that the folks who should have been
yeah.
saying it wouldn't say because they were, too reliant, and they too were the system, right? That's again the corporate Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
what is it? What was the group they came from? The Democratic Leadership Council, I think. The Clintons,
Mm-hmm.
the Obamas, the Gores.
Mm-hmm.
Um, who was the guy that was Gore's um, vice presidential running mate? I forget his name, but that wing though, right? The corporatist.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah,
let's
yeah,
slash social programs, or let's so we can
yeah.
try to get back some of these more conservative independents and Republicans who you never got back. Um,
Mm-hmm.
because things had
Mm-hmm.
already changed and begun to be radicalized in a way, and
Mm-hmm.
severely either underestimated or just decided to ignore just the depths of the white supremacist delusion, and people
Premises.
not wanting to let go
Yes.
of that. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Because at the end of the day, that's what you got left. That is the appeal. How is when they marvel to ask, how does this felon, this con man, this crass brute, all of these things, that are wrapped up in this persona. How do you be that and still get that kind of support? Combination of factors. The
Hmm.
fundamental is, yeah, white supremacy. So the promise, right? Because wrapped up in white supremacy is the promise to be a non-elite person of European descent, participating in whiteness, right? That aspirational piece. One day, I'm gonna get my place, I'm gonna get my status, my, all of that, the
what
promise
what
of
is
whiteness.
rightfully mine? Yes, all this
That which is, yes,
fantasy and
my
delusion,
ability
um,
to
the
participate
con
in
that has
this
been sold.
in this whiteness.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so um the environment crisis, I have to read it, is catching up fast too. Yes. Here in Colorado, we barely had a winter and the sky is filled with smoke today, and it is March.
There we go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, I mean,
Mhm.
I'm going to pose something and then I'm going to ask you something about Global South. I want to ask something about Global South. I'm going to pose something. So I have two questions for you. One, this notion that, the question of, will it be far left and far right, or far right? And the to what extent religiosity has to play a factor of various kinds in the far right options that are available, far right radicalization. You have to be going to into these notions, right? That you're that that constructing an ethno state, or
Wait a minute. What is the question?
some that be able to uh construct an ethno state will be the solution, right? That's is what other option? I think the question is, what other is there any other place for the far right to go in terms of that far right option, that new idea that's put in place, right? Um, in comparison to all of these other kinds of dynamics on the left that, as we've talked about often, take folk in the direction of reinforcing that the secular values, the trust in science, the trust in expertise, that tend to take the rational person toward left leaning values, toward left values. So that is the question. Is there anything else in the right, any other place for the right to go beside?
I don't know if there's any place else for the right to go. I mean, where does the right usually go? Right? I mean, it's um, when we think about historical or just the way fascism is played out, right? This again, the politics or the aesthetic, political aesthetics, right? It's so much of it is about spectacle and the performance of the nation, right? The performance of the
Mm-hmm.
glorious past, and always
Mm-hmm.
that um,
Mm-hmm.
that promise to resurrect, right? To resurrect a glorious past to carry us into a golden age future, right? The very thing Trump declared in his second inaugural speech. I don't know where else the right is to go. What have these guys been saying? You talked about it earlier, right? The technocrats want to,
Mm-hmm.
create what they're talking about. What are these ideas of techno feudalism?
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
none of it's forward looking, right? It's again techno feudalism,
Yes.
right? They're talking about going
Mm-hmm.
backwards. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the what is it? The Peter Thiel claim and others that democracy is exhausted, democracy doesn't
Mm-hmm.
work, and so what
Mm-hmm.
is your option then? What are you saying?
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know where else does the right go, and ethno state. I mean that depends, right? If it's the tech the techno feudalist future, that's not an ethno state, right? That's a corporate state.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, indeed,
Mm-hmm.
what do they say? What's the idea? Corporate city states, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's something
Mm-hmm.
else. United States, right? That the notion of a new idea has to be put in place. We are dealing with the far right right now, right? And the idea that
Mm-hmm.
the far right is trying to put
Mm-hmm.
in place, and
Mm-hmm.
what they're trying to put in place is regression, right? Not
Exactly.
a return to the again we pre 20th century social relations,
Right.
19th century social relations in so many
Mm-hmm.
ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned religiosity, and we know that in this
Mm-hmm.
country anyway, and maybe there are aspects.
Yes.
I'm not a student of the global right, but I do know that they're all connected
Mm-hmm.
and talking to each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So maybe in these other countries
Yes.
we're seeing an emergence of the right. Right, there's the
Mm-hmm.
religious wing, or at least a. But then patriotism, right, is the civic religion, right, or the,
Mm-hmm.
and the story of the nation, um, is a sacred story, right, or is told in that way. So in some ways, the far right isn't going anywhere than
Yeah.
different than where it has always gone, right?
It's been, which really, it really was some what I was wanting to have asserted, kind of going around the bush, that a new idea being put in place. The right doesn't have any new ideas. There are no new ideas. And I'm curious as to the extent, with robust um, civic discourse and this environment of this spontaneous political education, that is happening, what is the potential for exposing that, for what it is. These ideas, they've tried and failed. That's what this is what a big part of uh, what at least 20th century, at least from the 20th century, folks have been vigorously disproving that this is a workable social order, that it's a workable economic order, that it's a workable. I mean, so there's perhaps a way through that's a component, kind of exposing. Yeah, there is something being offered to you, an ideology that's being offered, but all of this has been disproven. Has already been, shown to be kind of
Mhm.
defunct and not generative. This isn't taking you anywhere. Never has, never will.
Mhm.
Um, and then that part, okay, that part. Whereas, one thing that can be said is all kinds of examples of how leftward movements have, and leftward statecraft, leftward right, has improved social conditions. They abound. They abound. You know,
Well,
Perfection, imperfection, whatever.
here
You
in the
know.
United States, right, in an effort to save capitalism, the New Deal, I mean, is an example of that, right? And it did
Mm-hmm.
indeed save capitalism, and and keep the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
from going further left. But those were
Mm-hmm.
social reforms; those were socialist programs, right? The public spending,
Mm-hmm.
public spending on
Mm-hmm.
infrastructure, public spending to keep people employed, public spending
Mm-hmm.
to institute social security, etc. Right, and then the rest, the middle of the 20th century, the extension of that up until maybe some of these agencies developed in the early or in the 70s and 80s, like the Environmental Protection Agency and the Department of Education, et cetera, right, as a further extension of that, but
Mm-hmm.
which is also exactly what came under attack with the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
with the apparatus of the state once the Reagan administration was in place. So the dismantle began. But to your point, um, even in the capitalist countries, it is the socialist interventions that
Yes.
saved capitalism for them and made life
Yes.
more livable for a larger
Yes.
group of people.
Number of
And I
people.
think
Yes.
I think we should continue to pursue that conversation maybe next week.
Mm-hmm.
As we're at
Mm-hmm.
8:13, and
Mm-hmm. Oh.
we
Mm-hmm.
could start wrapping up. Although I will also,
Okay.
well, we also had something else on our agenda though too to get to it. Just a little commentary on the UN vote.
Yeah.
Did want
Yeah.
to again, you see on the screen another comment.
I do.
Um, yeah, LG Aguaro. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but thank you for joining the
Mm-hmm.
conversation. Did you have a
Absolutely.
comment on LG Aguaro's?
Yeah. I mean, I really appreciate the comment, and um, I agree. This in terms of what's being seen, the right having fallen, is falling, has fallen, has done been fallen. Um, the falling away of, and is falling. Part of this piece, though, they point out that Trump isn't a real conservative. Um, he's not a political thinker. He's not a state. That's never been what he's about. He is certainly a product of uh, the white supremacist culture, if not and all of which is not embodied in conservative politics as such. But the association of the conservative, the conservative energy, the conservative aura, the conservative, right, um, uh, aesthetic that certainly, I'm going to call it aesthetic, that certainly supports white supremacy and is in our popular understanding aligned with, right, popular white supremacy. And I'm saying all of this in this way because I think when you start talking about Trump, what he really is, what he really isn't politically, what so much matters with him is what he is culturally, right? And what he represents, right? So there's an association with all of these elements, and it's what he represents that matters, right? That is gaining has, gained people's attention and vote and all of these things. As, yeah, um, all of the underpinnings of uh, right wing ideology have been subverted, and they have been subverted successfully from all these different angles, whether it's a cultural discussion, whether it's a discussion about pluralistic democracy, a multiracial, multicultural democracy, whether that, that even has become the expectation, has become a popular expectation. Yeah, that's a subversion of the right. That's a subversion of the right. But how we capture that, I think, and articulate that and make it abundantly clear as folks are figuring out how to choose. People are looking for which side am I on, and how do I get more aligned, right? And yeah, and just and make things clearer. And I think that's what I had to say about that. But so we'll skip the question that I wanted to ask you about Global South to get to the UN to talk about that part, right? The reparations or the recognition of the transatlantic slavery.
And I don't have a lot to say, and we're an hour and 20 in, pretty much. Just wanted to acknowledge it, and it reminds me of, or puts in mind, the short-sightedness, I think I can say, of the FBA ADOS movement. Again, wanting to divorce itself from the rest of the African world while this is happening. I'm still convinced, and I think some evidence has shown. It starts as what do they call it, an astroturf movement, and is only beneficial, to the empire, right? In anything that's separating this substantial, African descended nation within a nation, this internal colony, from other Africans in the world. Ghana didn't make the resolution just for Ghanaians or just for continental Africans, right? But also for those of us in the diaspora, both historical and contemporary. So it just highlighted for me the political short-sightedness of trying to separate out, right, from the larger global African network of communities and nations. There was another point, but I think it just got away from me. So it'll come back some other time. But anyway, it's the designation of crime against humanity is,
Mm-hmm.
it's important for legal reasons in terms of being able to make demands for reparations and accountability in all the various ways
Mm-hmm.
that can be
Mm-hmm.
enacted, right? Beyond, the that simple, that oversimplified notion of reparations as a check, right? That folks are going to get. Oh, that was the other
Mm-hmm.
thing. Um, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Afro Think Tank.
Mm-mm.
Afro Think Tank is a content creator
Mm-hmm.
um, on YouTube. I don't know, might be on some other platforms, but is on YouTube. And coming from the Pan Africanist, right, African internationalist, um, global African
Mm-hmm.
family perspective, right? I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
Afro Think Tank is, I, Afro Think Tank is from the U.S., but does a lot of content from the continent, and I'm not sure he may have, made a permanent move. I'm not positive of that, but he shared the other day, the same day that this proposal was put forward by Ghana, um, with President Mahama of Ghana
Mm-hmm.
in New York, meeting with Mamdani. Um, he shared a video of some FBA activists basically
Mm-hmm.
clowning. I mean, basically clowning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, calling Mamdani out of his name, trying to clown the Ghanaian, like, when is Ghana going to pay us reparations? This as Afro Think Tank, and just pointing out this is how embarrassing, right, FBA is
Mm-hmm.
in this moment. And I actually saw that
Mm-hmm.
before, any of the coverage of this UN vote about designating
Mm-hmm.
slavery and the enslavement of Africans, the human trafficking called the Middle Passage, as the gravest
Mm-hmm.
crime against humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so as I'm hearing the news of, this historic vote that passes with only three no votes, the United States,
Mm-hmm.
Israel, Argentina,
Mm-hmm.
55 abstentions, including pretty much all the European countries, including the former colonizers, um,
Mm-hmm.
who, don't want to go on record against it, but also don't want to vote
Mm-hmm.
because of, legal accountability. The
Mm-hmm.
that here this thing is happening, and this clown show, of FBA is trying to show
Mm-hmm.
division, and but that too is a minority position, just like the MAGA is a minority position, just a minority in power, and just like
Mm-hmm.
the the Christian nationalist wing of MAGA is a minority position. They're just a powerful minority, a loud minority in power right now.
Mm-hmm.
And please do not let me attribute too much power to FBA, talking about, MAGA, but they're
Mm-hmm.
supporting that, right?
Yeah.
They end up being, whether they are actually supporting or not, it ends up being supportive of these most
Yes.
retrogressive,
Great. Yes.
regressive, um,
Yes.
jingoistic American,
Yes.
ideology, right? And useful
Yes.
to the empire, to sow
Yes.
division. So anyway, I just, Afro Think Tank is a good follow. I also, Afro Think Tank's a good follow. But it was
Mm-hmm.
just the juxtaposition of these FBA activists on a microphone, just being clownish and disrespectful,
Uninformed.
uninformed,
Yes. Right. Yeah.
uninformed, or
Yeah.
informed and maliciously misinforming
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
juxtaposed to this vote um, in the UN. And
Yeah.
somebody asked the representative from Ghana about contact with a support that is support from African American organizations,
Mm-hmm.
which is yes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some of the mainstream is that yes, absolutely. We talked, we consulted,
Yes.
everybody's on board, etc. Right.
Yes.
So, um, you know, the work is in front of
Unity.
us,
Yeah.
right? The work is in front of
Yes.
us. But that
Yes.
they're a minority position, and they need to remain a minority position and be called out,
Well,
right? Be called out for their, for this subterfuge.
and one thing about it is the certainly this moment and this historic moment is going to reverberate through the community and become a topic of discourse,
Mm-hmm.
lending the opportunity to discredit,
Mm-hmm.
disprove
Mm-hmm.
this foundational Black American ADOS madness,
Mm-hmm.
piece by piece, dismantle it plank by plank as
Yeah.
this, the excitement over this. Well, what does it mean? For the same reasons, right? That this look for deeper understanding is happening in every sector, at this time. So again, the opportunity. What I wanted to say a couple of beats back was to um, push back in a substantial way against the influence that discourse has had, the ADOS FBA influence was able to garner, you know. Um, and so it's before us. And I, I
Mm-hmm.
dare say that's um, a microcosm of perhaps what's happening in the global South, or what may also happen in the global South as Western Asia and Europe are in this tight contention and are dealing with, are uh, uh, in this conflict, right? Figuring out uh, how we resituate ourselves and how what is the term? What discourses or narratives? That's the word. What narratives are going to be embraced and right and carried into our next stage.
Yes. There it is. So with that, I had an idea, but I think I'll save that idea for next time and to do it at the beginning of our conversation. So, and that idea is just to, introduce ourselves a little more thoroughly. Um, but we can save that for next time.
Absolutely, absolutely, that can be saved.
Yeah.
Brooklyn 0222, thank you so much. El Giaguaro 9970, thank you so much for inputting and joining us and um, making comment. We love it when that happens. That's always so wonderful. Come back anytime and jump into the conversation. And I wanted to say that, wanted to put out that thank you.
So with that, let's remind you to do those things that we need and like. Please subscribe to our channel if you haven't subscribed already. The Joko Collective channel on YouTube. Please like this video. Help us with the algorithm. Help us overcome the tyranny of the algorithm. And if you're watching this on Facebook, please do the equivalent. Give us a like or a love, even. And share. Let other people know. And I want to also echo Tasha. Thank you for participating. And if you want, you can even leave a comment, on the video. And those of you watching this at a later date, yeah, leave a comment, join the conversation. We'd love to hear from you, and we're happy to respond to your comments. What you liked, what you didn't like, right? What you want to add to the conversation, what you want to dispute, whatever.
Yes.
The Joko is founded not on debate, but on deliberation. So let us reason together. And
Yes.
we will see you the
Until
next
next
time.
time.
We
Yes.
expect to be next Thursday. And, I always, or at least often say this, maybe something will drop between this Thursday and next Thursday, but we'll be back with our conversation next Thursday. And Tasha can ask her question about the global South. Did you make a note of it?
Yes, I will remember.
Yes. And then that other stuff will, we can get back to some introductory stuff. Thanks, folks. I'll close the way I always close, quoting Bob Marley from the Natty Dread album. The
Yes.
song is Revolution. Revelation reveals the truth. It takes a revolution to make a solution. Let's make a revolution, y'all.